Psalm 107. The psalmist is kind of, well, it's been a review of Hebrew history, and he continues it, but in a very metaphorical way. We talked about verses 10 and 11 last time. Some sat in darkness, in utter darkness, prisoners suffering in iron chains. This is very bleak. Why? Because they rebelled against God's commands and despised the plans of the Most High. Never works out well when you despise God's plans, his design. Verse 12, so he subjected them to bitter labor. Now there were certainly more than one time when Israel was subjected to bitter labor, but the one that jumps to my mind, first of all, is in Egypt during the reign of Ramses II, the Pharaoh, who, in the book of Exodus, the writer, writes, he had no memory of Joseph and no regard for Israel other than for their slave labor. And as they grew in number, they became what he believed was a very real and present threat. If you extrapolate the numbers, about 650,000 men of fighting age in an era without birth control, where generally the vast majority of men of this age were married, you quickly come up with about 3 million people. Yeah, 3 million people if they were, armed and organized, could have done significant damage, or had a significant impact anyway, on Egypt. Well, okay. And so he subjected them to hard labor, bitter labor here. They stumbled, and there was no one to help. The metaphorical aspect of this has to do with our experience. None of us are slaves. None of us, even if you got a really, really crummy job, none of us are subjected to bitter labor. Not in this sense. But we all know what it is to stumble, and for most of us, we have had a time, at least one, where there was no one to help. That's a very bleak moment. I'm so grateful that when I have stumbled, really, there was only maybe 1 or 2 times in my entire life when I didn't have someone to help. A couple of things here. When a marriage is built on God's design by 2 imperfect people in submission to a perfect God and a perfect plan, it's going to be messy no matter what. But one of the, in my experience, personal experience, one of the most amazing and wonderful aspects of being married for, 49 and a half years, is that I've always had someone there when I stumble. And I'm so grateful that my wife, Debbie, is not judgmental when I stumble. I do this routinely, it feels like. She doesn't stand and, point a finger and frown and say, I told you so, or that's just like you. I know people who have marriages like that. And it's kind of just an ugly relationship. We don't have a perfect marriage because neither one of us are perfect, and I'm way, way, way behind her on the scale of perfection. But we're doing our best, the best we know to do, or I don't always do the best I know to do. Our marriage is still messy, but we have each other, and that was God's design from the beginning with Adam and Eve. A second aspect of this has to do with friends. The older I get, the more difficult I find it to be to make new friends. Part of it is my world seems to have gotten smaller as I'm not doing church ministry anymore. And when I was, lots and lots of people in and out of my life, and connecting and bumping into lots and lots of people. Nowadays, not so much. But I do know I have some friends who, when I stumble, all I have to do is call out. And I'm really, you think about this, I'm very blessed. I got a mobile phone that I can call across the country, and it doesn't cost me a penny to connect with these friends who they will come alongside. They'll listen to me. They'll talk to me. They'll pray for me. Friendship, that's one of the safeguards against stumbling and having no one to help. And then this one, for us, God has given us the church. He has invited us, He has designed us, He has planned for us to be a part of His church. There's no perfect church. And I can't even remember where I read it, but it made me laugh because of its truth. The quote was, there is no perfect church, and if you ever find that perfect church and you attach yourself to it, it will no longer be perfect. Because the church is made up of people. And there was only one perfect person, and that's Jesus, who's still present in the church and desires the church to reflect His name, His nature, His character, His love for the world. And I know what it's like to feel like that plan is not working well. I know what it's like to feel judged by church people. I know what it's like to encounter church people who, in certain moments, and there have been times when it was not just one moment, but it was a string of moments where, for whatever reason, people in the church did not reflect the love and grace of Jesus. And I have a empathy, I guess I would say, for people who have had deep church hurts, deep wounds from the church. I've had that too. And there are times when it made me not be, well, probably the kindest way for me to say this about myself is I was not enthusiastic about the church. Really? Yeah. I'm grateful that today I'm part of a church that I am enthusiastic about. And I'm so grateful that within that church, Debbie and I have made friends, and well, this is one of the reasons why we enjoy. I hope that's not too selfish of a word, but we love the fellowship of our churches because lots of our friends from our first 13 years here in Las Vegas are members and attenders. And so we have connections and support. I have a hope, and I think it's in harmony with the desires of Jesus for the church, that instead of it being built around, organized around a lot of human biases and big preferences, that it will become more and more what God intended for it to be, how he his design for it, that it would be Jesus in our culture. Now, Jesus wasn't all about lovey-dovey, I just want to make you happy. No, I mean, he was full of love. I really love what John said about Jesus, that he was full of grace and truth, not full of one or the other, and not half and half, was all grace and all truth. And when those two things get married in a church, we get to have impact. We don't get control, but we get impact in our culture. I could go a long time on the idea of the privilege that it is and the role that we are given to be in our world, in our culture, but to not be absorbed by it. I read finished it this morning, an interesting book called Adventures in Churchland. And it described a good bit of my experience and projected the hope of the church being Jesus in our culture. When I am walking with Christ and obedient to the Holy Spirit and to God's design, I will have someone to help when I stumble, because I'm going to stumble. Israel had put themselves in a place because of their despising God's plan and rejecting his commands, where they did not have someone to help. When they stumbled, there was no one to help. I don't want to be there. I don't want to, and I'm not sure that you can get there accidentally. I think you get there, you can wander, but I think it's because when a person would get there, it's because they I don't think they necessarily chose to get to that point, but they made a series of decisions that brought them there. I guess my challenge today is think through where are you in this? Do you have someone to help? If you're married, have you built a relationship with your spouse where they are the one? Do you have friends in your life? Or are you connected to God's family in relationships? So you have one at least. I'm not I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm just saying, look at your life. Make some choices. Well, okay, time's up. See you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.